Welcome everyone to Millie Globe, and let's talk about white supremacy because every time this comes up, people act like it's ancient history or not that serious. And I'm gonna be real, I'm tired of that. So, guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. So, white supremacy is not just people in hoods or extremists yelling slurs. That's the part people want to focus on because it makes it easier to say, that's not me. But white supremacy is a system. It's an idea that says some people are naturally better, more deserving, more human than others. And that idea didn't come out of nowhere. It was built to justify colonization because let's be honest, if you want to steal land, resources, and labor, you need a story that makes it okay. So they said black people were inferior, indigenous people were savages, other cultures were backwards, and suddenly violence became civilization, theft became exploration, slavery became economics. And yet people still defend that till today. So guys, watch this video until the end to get the real story. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah, and I actually don't think this is my real voice.
This right here is one of the main reasons that Black women are considered to be angry and aggressive, because we speak in our natural tone. The person I stitched in this video goes on to talk about how they realize that they've been speaking in this fake like customer service voice, and that they've decided that they want to start using their real natural deep tone. And all of the comments are from other women being like, oh my God, yes, I do this all the time. What is it? Why do I do it? And a few people have pointed out, like, you know, this is something we do culturally where we tend to raise our voices to seem more pleasant, to seem less aggressive, so that, you know, people that we don't know are comfortable around us. But what's missing from the discussion in those comments is the aspect of white supremacy. This whole like corporate talk phenomenon that we experience, that is a direct result of white supremacy. Corporate culture is white supremacy. Conformism of corporate culture, the, you know, changing who you are authentically to fit into this corporate box, that's just white supremacy. The pretending that everything's fine when it's not really fine, that's white supremacy, right? What we call professionalism, right? Putting a smile on it, even though you're being totally disrespected, that's white supremacy. And most of the women in her comments were white women saying, yeah, I do this too, I do this too. It's because of white supremacy. White supremacy has stolen white women's voice. That's why y'all be out here like, hi. Meanwhile, your real voice is like deep as fuck, just like mine. It strips your power away. It makes you more palatable to white men, because remember, they're the ones that created white supremacy and the concept of professionalism and corporatism. And it strips away your sense of authority, right? Because if you're always talking like this and, you know, you're trying to like, where's your authority? Stand in that fucking base, bitch. And that's why Black women, that's one of the reasons why we are always demonized, because we don't do that. We don't do that. I mean, of course, some of us do when we have to, when it's time to get that money. But for the most part, we're going to speak with that bass in our voice. So if you're a white woman, or any woman, honestly, but especially a white woman or a non-Black woman who engages in this, who catches yourself always raising your voice and, you know, making yourself more palatable to strangers, I encourage you to work on speaking in your true voice and taking one more piece of your power back from this fucked up ass system.
People of color are objectively attractive. This is not a hot take. So many white people look at beauty as simply being someone with white skin. It doesn't matter what that person's features are or how beautiful they really are. And I keep receiving comments on all of my posts about how people of color aren't attractive, how Black women aren't attractive, and that is blatantly wrong. The reason you don't find them attractive is because you're lying to yourself because of white supremacy. I've even had people be like, oh, well, I find them attractive, I just won't date them to preserve my race and preserve my culture, thus admitting literally what I'm saying. I mean, look at this. Look, I'm going to show you some people. I mean, these people are just objectively absolutely stunning and beautiful. And a lot of celebrities who are people of color haven't had any work done, and they're so gorgeous. Whereas the white beauty standard is having a lot of filler, being on Ozempic, really altering your body to be as thin as possible. Just because you are claiming that someone isn't attractive does not mean that that is a universal thing. In fact, in a lot of places outside of America and Europe, non-white people are the standard. You can say what you want, but stop declaring who you find attractive as objective fact because you're fucking.
I'm not surprised that in 2025 there are white people saying colonization was a good thing. Listen, white supremacists lie like they breathe. They'll rather tell a lie than educate themselves with the truth, because the truth will destroy every illusion and delusion of superiority and lead to their mental breakdown. So when the unwashed, unmoisturized, and unseasoned have the caucasity to say to us that colonization was good, yeah, that is peak white ignorance.
We now have a generation that believes everything we did by colonizing. Yes, it is true. They think everything about colonization was wrong. It wasn't. There were some terrible things and there were some good things to
Nothing
come out of
good.
it. And that is about properly acknowledging your past.
Education.
Yes, completely.
Sanitation.
Transport.
Lies.
There was so much that we brought to
This is
community. Absolutely
diabolical.
does.
Those countries did not have money.
What?
They did not have the creativity. They did not have
That's
people in
outrageous.
positions of
Thing to
power.
say.
What utterly preposterous assertions to make. Every word said by Carol Malone and this lady in the clip are all lies, shamelessly obtuse and downright racist. Let's use African nations as an example. The view of African nations as backwards, not having written language or educational systems, being technologically unadvanced, or that they were not regulated by law and order, not having transportation, etc., are all false, deliberately criminal, and rooted in white supremacy. Education, native writing systems to West, East, Southern, and North Africa existed on the African continent long before the white man ever stepped foot there. The Insibidi alphabet native to South Nigeria, the Gaze alphabet native to the Horn of Africa, the Egyptian hieroglyphs, or the Meroitic alphabet native to the Kingdom of Kush, Sudan, for which there's evidence it is the source of the Phoenician alphabet which forms the modern-day alphabet used by the West. Yeah, we gave you that. Transportation? Have you never heard of the Trans-Saharan trade route, or all of the trade routes from one end of the African continent to the other, or the historical evidence that Africans sailed to North America, South America, Asia, the Middle East, Mediterranean, and Europe, establishing international trade routes long before the Europeans? How do you think we did that, huh? Swinging from tree to tree across oceans? Listen, a little bit of critical thinking can go a long way. Yeah, Africans go to the Americas before Columbus. Sanitation? Hell no. We are not taking points from a people that can't even be bothered to wash their own legs and who think that showering with a sponge is unhealthy. No creativity? The Nok people of Nigeria are credited with developing the Iron Age as far back as 6-7 BC. Yeah. And the Haya people in Tanzania are credited with developing steel as far back as 2,000 years ago. No money? Then why is the West built on the exploitation of the natural, mineral, and human resources of African nations?
You will hear things like, well, colonization brought roads, education, religion, as if those things cancel out genocide, as if stolen land is suddenly okay because somebody built a school on it, as if millions of dead bodies are just the price of progress. And the truth is, they were all these things before they came to Africa or to other countries, but they still act like they brought it, So guys, and here's the part people don't like to admit, that thinking never went away. It's just got cleaner. It got quieter. It puts on a suit. White supremacy affects black people in obvious ways: over-policing, mass incarceration, wealth gaps, healthcare disparity, education systems that punish us more than they protect us. It's being seen as a threat before being seen as human. It's having to work twice as hard to get half as much and still being told you're playing the victim. But it doesn't stop with black people. It hurt indigenous communities whose land is still being taken. It has immigrants who are blamed for problems they didn't create. It hurts Asians who get treated like perpetual outsiders. It hurts Muslims who get surveilled just for existing. And yes, it hurts poor white people too. That's the part nobody wants to talk about.
The only reason the Holocaust is viewed as bad is because its victims were white. What the fuck did he say? The only reason the Holocaust is viewed as bad is because its victims were white. When people of color get genocided, it's either viewed as necessary or it isn't viewed at all.
White supremacy is actually pretty hilarious. Now, they're screaming white genocide. Now that the playing field is being leveled, they think it's a personal attack on them specifically, not understanding that because the playing field is being leveled, the truth is being revealed. And the truth is, you are not the dominant race. If we all start at the same starting line at the same exact time, you would be left in the dust, and you're starting to be faced with that reality. Like, you're starting to have to come face to face with that. That's what you're dealing with. Nobody's trying to wipe you out like y'all tried to wipe us out. We're not like you. We're not here to do to you what you did to us. We would actually rather be left alone. And I'm speaking about people of color, all minorities, not just black folks, but definitely for black folks. It's like a video game. If we're all playing with the standard abilities that the game comes with, and you somehow got access to some evil cheat codes, and you literally like just murking us the entire game, and we figure out how to get rid of your cheat codes, and we all have the same level of ability, we all have the same level of opportunity, we all have the same space and time, and start to realize who actually got it like that, who actually is dominant.
White people are suffering from white supremacy too. I had a conversation with a client the other day who is a professor. They teach about white supremacy, African American rhetoric, and XYZ, and different concepts in the diaspora. And we were talking about how white people also are affected and are suffering from white supremacy as well, in the way that my phone overheated, but in the way that white people have no connection to their own culture or any culture whatsoever other than whiteness, white American culture. So an example of this would be that my friend and client who asked his class, how many of you participate in mutual aid? Nobody raised their hand. None of the white people raised their hand. He goes, okay, let me rephrase that, and says, how many of you have gone to a friend's house and their parents cooked for you? And then everyone raised their hand. And he goes, right, this is mutual aid. The way that white people have had to come up with a word for community, aka mutual aid, shows that they are suffering from white supremacy as well. While they think they're benefiting, you're actually not allowed to participate in things that would be beneficial to you because of white supremacy. And it's made to seem like black and brown people are the only people who participate in these things or who would benefit from these things. We, as POC people, we've always known and always participated in mutual aid or community because that's how we thrive. And we are not just self-focused, we're community-focused, community-oriented. And so the things we do are not just for ourselves, they're to benefit our community because that's how it's always been in our cultures. And while white people for so long have tried to strip us of our culture, we still have roots that tie us to our ancestors and our culture and these different practices that have been around long before we've ever existed. And if white supremacy didn't exist or wasn't so prevalent, white people would be allowed to connect to their culture as well. But they've been so brainwashed into believing that having culture or allowing black and brown people to participate in their culture is a threat to them, and that when we engage in culture it's part of our culture to be violent or oppressive, but really that's white supremacy culture. That's what y'all created. It's not in our culture to overtake others and be violent unnecessarily and hateful and oppressive. That's just not in us. Our cultures are uplifting and bring community together. We dance, we sing, we create, we craft, we tell stories. That's our culture, and that's many of y'all's culture. But white people refuse to see it that way. And so really, white people are keeping themselves in this vicious cycle of disconnection, of violence, and then want to be like, well, slavery was 300 years ago, like, why don't you just forget about it? No, like, you're still keeping that shit going, and it's actually having negative impacts on white people as well.
Normalize exposing white supremacist TikToks.
There is
basically no differences between being in the African safari versus being in Memphis or St. Louis. I compared the wildlife in Africa to Memphis, or honestly any major city for that matter, because it's literally the same thing. Just instead of animals, it's human beings who are supposed to function in a society.
You are not a minority. Stop using that to blame all your poor life choices on being a minority or being marginalized. I'm a minority. I take personal accountability. Given I don't go around in big cities murdering people or stealing or fighting others, that's a different group. You need to stop playing the victim card. I don't even do that, okay? How do you think I felt growing up getting called Carrot Top my whole life?
That again, the whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember, during the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people. I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real, right? But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other. That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right? I mean, that was the history of Europe. The English hated the Irish, right? Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody, and everybody hated their ass right back, right? There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why. And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, you know, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants, who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up, and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another, or they're going to rise up and take our stuff, right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people. Right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team. The easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right? Because at least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man, right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line. Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor. They still don't have anything. They didn't pay the slave patrol well, right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped. Because the divide and conquer had begun to work, right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks, they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown.
Daily reminder, you're being brainwashed by propaganda. Do you not understand that conservatives want to conserve, keep it the way it is? The American colonists who argued against leaving England, those were the conservatives. The founding fathers were progressives, and most of them were not Christian.
Black people are lucky to be Americans. If it weren't for white people having slaves back in the day, there would be no black people in America.
And white people should be lucky that the Spaniards gave you boats so you can escape the treacherous brutality of King James. You know, he was burning white people at the stake for being pagans. You should also thank, most importantly, the indigenous people of North America for teaching you how to live off the land, because you could have died your first winter. In my humblest opinion, the indigenous people should have just put arrows in every last one of you. But that's just me. However, it will not take away from white people being thankful that the indigenous people taught you how to live off the land to survive your first winter. With that being said, this concludes the lecture, and everyone enjoy your wonderful Friday.
White supremacy convinces poor white people that their enemy is minority instead of the system exploiting them. It gives them a false sense of superiority instead of actual power. It says you may be struggling, but at least you're not them. And while people are busy fighting each other, the same elites keep winning. That's not an accident, that's the design. And women don't even get me started. White supremacy is deeply tied to patriarchy. It thrives on controlling women's body, limiting autonomy, and enforcing rigid roles. White women were used as symbols to justify violence, protecting them, while black and indigenous women were abused with no protection at all. And today, women of all races still dealing with laws and system that treats their body like a public property. So when people say, I don't see white supremacy anymore, what do they really mean? Like, I don't see it affecting me personally in a way I'm willing to acknowledge. Because if white supremacy wasn't a problem, we wouldn't be still debating whether racism exists. We wouldn't be still arguing about history books. We wouldn't be still saying the same names of groups bottom generation after generation. And let me be clear, talking about white supremacy is not saying all white people are bad. That's lazy thinking. That's defensive thinking. This is about a system that benefits some people whether they asked for it or not, and harms others whether they deserve it or not. The real question isn't do you personally hate anyone? The question is, are you willing to challenge the system that advantages you if it means justice for everyone? Because denying white supremacy doesn't make you neutral, it makes you a complicit. And until people stop treating this like an insult instead of a reality, we're going to keep going in circles while the same inequality stays right where they are. That's the truth, and if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Growth usually does. So, guys, think about it and let us be a free world, because every kid, every child, every woman, every man, every person deserves it. So if you enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, don't forget to comment, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope to see you in my next video.